Welcome back, homebodies. My name's Amy. Welcome to my channel, Catskill Mountain Homebody. Well, it's early in the morning on a weekend, and it's almost October. I'm very excited because October is an amazing month here in the Catskill Mountains, and a lot of fun things are going to happen in the month of October, so I'm very excited about that. I'm trying to be quiet because Joe's sleeping upstairs with the doggies. Well, I thought I would start this video with a look out the window because the leaves are starting to change and it's starting to look so wonderful and fallish outside. I love it. I love the fall. In the video that I made on how to make Italian tomato sauce, which was based on my grandmother's recipe, I had mentioned that I'm going to make sauce with meatballs, but that's going to be a separate video. So today's the day for Italian sauce with meatballs. And I'm going to make the meatballs the way my grandmother showed me how to make meatballs. And we're going to make a nice pot of sauce. And Joe and I are going to have meatballs and pasta for dinner. So that should be good. So I got up early today. I took a shower, put my hair in a ponytail, because we're going to get messy. We're going to cook. So I put on a pair of pants and a sweatshirt, because I don't care if the sweatshirt gets dirty. But when you make sauce, things splash, things splatter. So you definitely don't want to wear your best dress when you're making sauce. If you do, you should wear an apron. So I'm just kind of dressed sloppy today so that we can make some meatballs. Oh, my husband's up. Okay, Joe is up, so I don't have to talk so low anymore. As I mentioned, we're going to make meatball sauce today. It's going to be really good. But it is time consuming, especially in the beginning when you have to mix the meatball mix, fry the meatballs, and then prepare the sauce. Once you get the first part done, then it just simmers in a pot all day, and you have dinner later. So you just have to make sure that you're going to be home for the day when you make sauce. That's why I usually make it on a weekend when we don't have anything planned, so I can just sit here and stir the sauce all day. All right, so let me show you the ingredients. All right, let me show you my ingredients. I have 2.5 pounds of ground beef. One of the things you need to know that Grandma always told me is do not use ground beef that's too lean. Don't use ground beef that's 90% lean. You want to use ground beef that's 80% lean. Because if it's too lean and there's not enough fat in it, it will be dry. Your meatballs will be dry. So you don't want to use ground sirloin, for example. You want to use the 80% lean ground beef. I have 2 eggs that I have mixed up. This is where I keep my Italian style. This is where I keep my Italian style breadcrumbs. So we're going to be adding that. We're going to be adding some dried basil. I haven't pulled any more basil out of my garden, so I'm not going to do the fresh basil in this recipe today. Dried basil works just as well. I'm going to put some parsley in my meatballs, dried parsley. I'm going to put some kosher salt into the meatballs. I'm going to put some Pecorino Romano cheese. If you have Parmesan cheese, you can do that, but I have Romano. Some ground pepper I'm going to put in the meatballs, and we're going to fry them in the olive oil. So, I'm going to originally use my meat chopper to mix this, but eventually we're going to have to use our hands. So do not wear your rings to do this recipe, because your rings are going to get full of meat. Make sure your hands are clean and you don't have any jewelry on. Pull your sleeves back and really get in there and mix the meatballs. All right, let's get mixing. know about you guys, but when I mix cold meat with my hand, I get like a pain in my hand, like a cramp almost, and I have to run it under hot water. So I can only mix for so long before I am in pain from my hand being ice cold. But I managed to get it mixed. Little story about my grandma. So I have cooked meatballs with my grandma before she passed away. I have cooked with my grandma before. And I do remember some of the things she taught me when we were cooking with my mother. So a lot of what my mother did, my grandmother taught her. So as I mentioned in the video where I showed you how to make regular tomato sauce with like sausages, my grandmother taught me, don't put oregano in a meat sauce. So you'll notice I put no oregano in these meatballs, only basil. And my grandma taught me that oregano overpowers the sauce. And all you will taste is the oregano if you put them in your meatballs. But you want to have the flavor of the meat and the cheese and the other things, the basil. The only herb she put in her meatballs was basil, and the only herb she used in her meat sauces was basil. And again, I put some parsley in here, but parsley doesn't overpower the meatballs. No oregano. You can use oregano if you're making plain tomato sauce or you're making pizza sauce, but do not put oregano in your meatballs. Don't put oregano in your meat sauce. So that was one of her tips that I'm sharing with you, Julius, from when you make sauce for your family and all the other cousins and nieces and nephews. I'll share a funny story. One day when my son Julius was maybe 7 or 8, we were on the telephone with my grandmother, and the subject came up of how to make sauce. And so she started to tell Julius on the phone how to make the sauce and how to make the meatballs. And Julius went and put the phone down and said, Mom, get a pen. Hurry, she's telling us the secret recipe. We got to write it down. I laughed because I already had the recipe written down. I'm like, Julius, I already have it written down. You don't have to write it down now. He was like frantically looking for a pen because she was revealing her meatball secrets to him. So he wanted to write it down right then so that he would always have it. And this is why I'm making these videos. Because, my son, his cousins, they'll want to know what Grandma said about the meatballs and about the sauce, and some of the tips she had. So I'm gonna record those in these videos for anyone who wants to make meatball sauce. It's really not difficult. Anyone can do it, but also for the kids, for the grandkids, because they all loved Grandma's meatballs and they would want to know how to make the meatballs. So now that I've put the meatball mixture together, we are going to fry the meatballs in my big frying pan. But there's one more thing I have to add to this meatball mix before I can fry it. And I have to remix it a little bit more. And that is a little bit of chopped onion. And I'm going to mince the onion because you don't want big chunks of onion in the meatballs because the onions will fall out. So I'm going to mince some onion. So let's do that now on my butcher block table. So I've pulled out a little onion I'm going to put in the sauce and in the meatballs. I have a few cloves of garlic and a head of garlic that I'm going to use. So let's cut up and mince some onions. Okay, I have minced, and if you don't know what minced means, it just means I chopped the onion really, really tiny. So I have almost 1/3 cup of chopped onions that I'm going to mix into the meatballs. And this is going to help make the meatballs very moist. But you don't need to overpower the meatballs with the minced onion. So just a little bite of onion within the meatballs. So let's add this to the meatball mix. All right, once again, I'm going to use my hands. My hands have warmed up now. And we're gonna mix in the onions and the rest of this meatball mixture. Now, if you wanted to, you could add some garlic powder in addition to the onions. I'm not gonna do that, but you know, if you wanted more onion flavor than the minced onions gave. I don't put garlic in my meatballs. I do put garlic in the sauce, but I'm not gonna put it inside the meatballs. So that's pretty much it. I keep it simple. All right, ready for grandma tip? Get ready. One of the things my grandma stressed to me when making meatballs is don't mix meats. You know, some people use a mixture of like pork and lamb and beef. She taught me just beef. Only use ground beef in your meatballs. She never used lamb and sausage meat or pork or any other type of meat in her meatball. She kept it simple, just ground beef. So she taught me that I don't put any other meat in my meatballs. And I've had meatballs made with other meat. It's just not that it tastes bad, but she liked to keep it plain and simple. And she believed that the best meatballs were old school, you know, more of a high-fat ground beef, basil, cheese, salt, pepper, parsley, onion. That's it. It's an egg and breadcrumbs, of course. But she didn't put a whole lot of secret ingredients in her meatball. She kept it simple. And her meatballs were great. So I'm not adding any other kind of meat to these meatballs. It's literally ground beef. That's it. So that's another grandma's secret that she taught me. So I'm going to start heating up olive oil in my huge frying pan. And while that's heating, I'm going to chop the rest of the onion and I'm going to mince some garlic to put in the sauce later. So let's get the olive oil, my trusty olive oil, in the frying pan. Chopped about 4 cloves of garlic. I have this small yellow onion that I chopped up that I'm going to put in the sauce. I already have onion in the meatballs. And I can smell the olive oil. I have the olive oil heating on a medium-high burner. And now we're going to roll the meatballs and put them into the hot oil. Remember, when you can smell the olive oil, it's ready. I'm going to use my hands again to roll the meatballs into good-sized meatballs. And we're going to put them in the hot oil and we're going to brown them. All right, I'm going to take out my sauce pot. I have my trusty sauce pot ready for the sauce. I'm not using whole tomatoes in this recipe like I did in the last run. I don't have any whole tomatoes. I usually use San Marzano tomatoes in puree. I don't have that, so I'm going to use 2 cans of crushed tomatoes and 2 cans of tomato puree. And then we're going to use 2 cans of paste. So I'm going to start opening these cans and putting them in, not the paste, I'm going to open the cans of crushed and puree and start putting it into my big sauce pot, because when the meatballs are browned, we're going to pop them in with the rest of the sauce. So I think what I'm going to do, because the oil's hot, is I'm going to put the first batch of meatballs into the frying pan, get those started to brown, and then I'll start opening up my cans of crushed and pureed tomatoes. So let's start rolling some meatballs. right, my meatballs are frying. You can hear the sizzle. And you don't really need to cook them that long on each side, but you want them to be brown. Guess what? Some of the meatball is going to stick to the bottom of the pan. Don't worry about it. All that flavor and extra meat is going to be incorporated when you fry the paste. So nothing's going to be wasted. Here's another grandma tip. First, let me flip my meatballs, and then I'm going to tell you another tip. All right, see how some of these are nice and brown? Again, some of it's going to stick to the bottom of the pan. Don't worry. All that goodness is going to go into the sauce in the end anyway. And the meatballs sometimes will, you know, get a little stuck to the pan. That's okay. All right, here's another grandma tip. Okay, so grandma used to tell me, when you first make the meatballs, take a little bit of the meatballs, a little bit of the meatball mixture, flatten it. Flatten it into a little pancake. And we're going to fry this, okay? Make sure it's thin so it cooks quickly. Okay, so make sure it's flat. Put this in the pan with the other meatballs. We're going to fry this on both sides real quick. Get it all browned. Then we're going to eat it. We're going to taste test it. That way we know if there's not enough salt. It's mainly to test if they have enough salt. Because I know there's cheese and there's salt in this meatball mixture, but sometimes you don't put enough salt and it needs a little more. So you really need to taste it. And obviously you're not going to eat the whole meatball right now because it's not fully cooked all the way through. We're just browning the outside. So you got to make a little pancake of meatball mixture and taste it as the cook. And see, does the mixture need more salt before you finish making all the rest of the meatballs. So I usually make the first batch of meatballs, then I do a taste test because I want to make sure the pan is very hot before I do my taste test. And then if I have to add more salt, I'll add more salt. Notice I did not overcrowd the pan with the meatballs. I know you want to get this done quick. You're like, oh, I got to fry so many meatballs, it's going to take forever. Don't overcrowd the pan or they're not going to cook evenly. And you want them to be brown on the outside. You know, they really want them to have this caramelization on the outside. So let me show you my little taste test. Oh, my little taste test, little pancake is coming along good. The other meatballs are frying. I'm going to flip them again. I use a spoon. I use a spoon to flip the meatballs. I just find it works better. You can use a spatula, but I always use like a spoon so I can kind of like gently move them around. And I try to brown them on, you know, most sides, not every side. This is home-cooked meals, right? Let's check our pancake. Ooh, it's nice and, let me see it. Let's flip it. Here's the pancake. Let's flip it. Up, see how nice and brown it is? So when that's brown on both sides, we're going to do a taste test. And again, that was a great grandma tip. Yay, we're recording all grandma's tips, even though she's not here to tell us. I have to relay her, what she taught me, to the next generation and to anyone who wants to make sauce. So while these meatballs are continuing to cook, I'm going to open up more of my crushed and pureed tomatoes. All right, I have all of my tomatoes in the pot. To each can, I added a half a cup of water. And then I mixed all the tomato goodness from the cans in with the water and put it in the pot. The sauce is going to cook all day, so don't worry about the extra water because it's going to evaporate. And you're not going to have watery sauce if you cook it all day. All right, so let me look at our taste test. All right, our taste test is done. So let me get a little paper towel. I use one of the crushed tomato cans as my utensil holder. That way I don't get my adorable Halloween utensil holder dirty today. Because he's so cute. I got him from, I don't know if you guys know the Cracker Barrel. The Cracker Barrel is a restaurant that has a country store attached to it. It's usually off highways. And that's where I bought this little guy a couple years ago at the Cracker Barrel. I think I bought it in 2019. All right, so the taste test is cooked. This is my test meatball. Let's taste it. Delicious. It doesn't need any more salt. It's actually perfect. Now, if I ate this and it wasn't salty enough or didn't have enough flavor, I would mix in some more cheese and salt into the meatball mixture. But I can taste the cheese and the salt. Delicious. Oh, I can't wait for meatballs later. All right, don't eat all the meatballs before it's time to eat, but delicious. I don't need to add anything else to it, so thanks, Grandma, for that tip. Now that I have my cans of tomatoes emptied in my saucepan, I'm gonna put a little bit more basil in this saucepan. Just dried basil. We didn't harvest any more of our fresh basil, and we're gonna do that soon, but I want them to grow more, so I'm gonna do the dried basil today. I'm gonna put about a teaspoon of dried basil in with my tomatoes. Mix that in. This is gonna cook all day. Remember, no oregano in your meatball sauce. I'm gonna put a little salt also, maybe a teaspoon of salt. And I'm also gonna add some cracked black pepper. And that's all the seasonings I'm gonna put in this right now. And I'm gonna set this next to my frying pan, and I'm gonna start popping my meatballs that are fried into this big sauce pot. Time to roll some more meatballs. So just roll the meatballs in between your hands like this, and it'll take a shape of a, you don't have to be crazy and like do it for an hour. Just pop it in. I get enough to fill my palm. That's how big my meatballs are. You can make them any size you want. I like them like a little rock. Sometimes when you're rolling the meatballs, a piece of cheese or onion wants to come out. I just push that in the middle, add a little bit more meat on top of it, and roll it in. That way it's nice and hidden in the middle of your meatball. Again, I'm not overdoing it with making the meatballs. I'm going to do about maybe 6 meatballs in the pan at a time, because I want the meatballs to get nice and brown, and I don't want to overcrowd them. So there you go. Doesn't have to be perfect. I have 6 in there now. I'm going to put 1 more, and that's it. I'm going to wait for these to be done. All right, so there's an onion sticking out. I'm going to push those in. Is it perfect? No. But it's round enough. I'm going to wash my hands and we're going to start churning these. All right, let's look at how these are going. We're going to start flipping them. Anyone can make meatballs. Anyone can make this. You don't need to be Italian. There's no secret recipe that you can't access. Everybody can do this. So don't be afraid. Don't be intimidated. Don't think, oh, meatballs, Oh, that's so difficult. So many steps. No, it's not that difficult. And anyone can make a batch of sauce. Now, it's only Joe and I at home because Julius is at college. So I'm going to be freezing a lot of this sauce that we'll use on a later date. And frozen sauce is great to have on hand because it's a great, easy weeknight meal. So that's what I do. I'm going to put it all in the fridge tonight, and then tomorrow morning I'll pop out a few of them and put them in the freezer, and I'll save them for another day. I only have 6 or 7 in the pan at once because I don't want to overcrowd the pan. I'm going to start heating up my sauce. So let me show you. I have some meatballs that I've already browned in this pot of puree and crushed tomatoes. I'm going to put it on the back burner and start slowly heating it under low heat. So we'll start cooking the sauce. I still have a lot of meat left, so this will be a whole bunch of new meatballs. When all the meatballs are cooked, I am going to take them out. I'm not going to wipe out this frying pan because all the delicious goodness of the meatball flavors in that frying pan with that oil. So I am going to open my 2 cans of paste, and I have 2 6-ounce cans of paste from Cento. I'm going to put that into the frying pan with 2 cans of water. Mix that together, and we're going to deglaze the pan, get all the meatball goodness out of the bottom of the pan, and we're going to fry the paste at least 15 minutes. And if you saw my last video on how to make Italian tomato sauce, the most important part of making sauce, according to my grandmother, according to Grandma, was frying the paste. You have to fry the paste very well until it gets a darker color, because it's not going to cook in the big sauce pot. You're going to have raw paste in the sauce pot. If you just fry it for a minute and throw it in the sauce pot, it's not long enough. You have to really fry the paste. So here's the process. I'm going to be pulling the meatballs out when they're all done into the pot with the crushed and pureed tomatoes. I am going to saute the onions for a minute until they get caramelized. I'm going to throw the garlic in for another minute. I'm not going to let the garlic burn. I'm just going to saute the garlic for 1 minute, and then I'm going to immediately start putting the paste in and mixing the garlic and onions with the paste. Add the 2 cans of water, and we're going to fry the paste. So I'm going to show you that step. It's very important. According to my grandmother, that's the most important step of making sauce. If you don't fry the paste, you're going to have raw paste in your sauce. It's not going to taste right. So you have to have a delicious fried paste in your sauce. So I showed you that I have my minced garlic and onion. So this is going to be going into the sauce soon. Let me show you some of our yellow squash we got from our garden that we have to give away because we have so much yellow squash. This is just some of the yellow squash that we pulled out of the garden. These are the gigantic ones. We got a lot of rain and these guys grew nutsies. I think we're going to put these on the street on a little cart and with a sign that says free squash, because we can't eat hundreds of squash. No, we don't have hundreds of squash, but we've had a lot of squash, and we still have more growing in the garden. I showed you that in the last garden video. So, all right, these meatballs look done. I'm going to pop them in the pot. Time to roll more meatballs. I'm going to do about 5 or 6 meatballs. While we're waiting for these rest of these meatballs to cook, I also want to mention, I'm not making a huge pot of sauce. I only use 4 cans of crushed and pureed tomatoes. That's why I don't have a whole lot of onion and garlic. You could add another can of crushed tomatoes or puree if you have a larger family and you want to make more. You could also add a little bit more garlic and onion if you're going to make more for the sauce. But again, it's just me and Joe, so I don't need to go overboard and make like gallons of sauce because, I don't have that much room in my freezer. So I only use 4 cans of 2 crushed and 2 pureed tomatoes, plus the 2 cans of paste. And again, this is going to last Joe and I a long time because it's just the 2 of us. So browning the last of the meatballs. I still have meatballs to make though. See, 2.5 pounds of ground beef go a long way. You can make a lot of meatballs with that. So cooking in the kitchen like this reminds me of my grandmother. This was my grandmother's mother. These are my great-grandparents. I've introduced them in other videos, but that is Virginia and Michael. And as I mentioned in other videos, I never met Michael. He passed away when my mother was a little girl, but I did know my great-grandmother, Virginia. She died when I was about 6 years old, and I do remember her, and I remember meeting her. Of course, she was very elderly, in her 80s, and not in great health when I met her, and my memories of her aren't of her young, but I'm lucky that I was able to meet my great-grandmother. That's amazing. And my son really got to know his great-grandmother, my grandmother. My grandmother passed away, my mother's mother passed away when my son was almost 12 years old. So he has a lot of memories of his great-grandmother. How lucky is that? All right, all the meatballs are fried. I've put them into my big sauce pot. I have sauteed the onion and the garlic real quick in the very hot pan. And now I have added 2 cans of tomato paste, 6-ounce tomato paste, and 2 cans of water to get all the tomato goodness out of those cans. Now, notice how clean the bottom of my pot is, because when I put the tomato paste in, I deglaze the pan. So that's why you use a spatula to scrape the bottom of your frying pan as you're cooking the paste, and that will get all the bits of beef and tasty goodness into your paste. So we're gonna fry this for 15 minutes. Remember, this is the most important part of the recipe. You have to fry the paste at least 15 minutes until it gets to a darker color, and then you're gonna add it to your pot with all your meatballs. So here's all my meatballs. There they are. And I have this pot on low, starting to heat up. So we are going to fry this paste for 15 minutes or 20 minutes until it gets to be a little bit darker red. And then we're gonna pour this into the pot, and I'm going to simmer this all day long. Remember, Julia Child said, "No one is born a good cook, one learns by doing." If you don't know who Julia Child was, she was America's first famous television chef. She was trained to cook in France, but she was an American, and she started publishing cookbooks, and she had a television cooking show in the 60s and 70s. And her motto was that anyone can be a good cook. You don't have to, no one's born a good cook. You have to do. And that's how I learned how to cook. I learned how to cook when I moved into grad school, and I had to live off campus, and I had to buy my own food and cook. And I used to call my grandmother and my mother, and as I was making sauce, and I just experimented. I made artichoke pie. I made tomato sauce with meatballs. I made marinara sauce. I made chicken cutlets. I made chicken cutlet parmesan. I cooked as a 22-year-old, and I figured it out. And you can figure it out too. So don't tell yourself you can't cook or you're not a good cook. Nobody's a good cook. Nobody's born a good cook. You know how many meals I messed up and I had to throw in the garbage? Many over the years. That's okay. That's how you learn. You learn by doing. So don't sell yourself short. You can be a good cook. It doesn't matter your gender. It doesn't matter your race. It doesn't matter how old you are. Everyone can learn to be a good cook. Try it. The more you try, the better you get. Practice makes perfect, like anything else in life. I think I mentioned before, I know this is not the healthiest of recipes. It's not. We don't eat this every day. I told you, Joe and I mainly eat chicken breast. That's mainly what we eat every night is chicken breast, lean meat. We don't eat beef very often. Actually, matter of fact, I never cook steak. You'll never see me cook steak on this channel. But we do indulge in meatballs every once in a while. So don't sell yourself short. And obviously, these family memories and these family recipes I want to preserve so that every generation can make this type of recipe. So when you're cooking the paste, you're going to have to stir it a lot. So let's go check the paste. So the paste is frying. And again, you're going to just keep stirring it. You don't want it to burn to the bottom. Look how nice and clean the bottom of the pan is, though. All the goodness of the olive oil and the meatballs are all in the paste now. That's all flavor that you're putting into your sauce. Is this ready yet? No, it's not ready yet. We need to cook. I'm going to actually set a timer for another 10 minutes right now, and that'll be about 20 minutes.
Starting now.
All right, this is going to be so delicious. And it's going to make the house smell like heaven all day. We're going to smell like Grandma's house all day. What I would give to eat my grandma's sauce. I'm still frying up my paste, and you can hear it sizzling. That's what you want. You want to hear it sizzle. And you want to stir it so it doesn't burn. But every once in a while, I will stop and clean the kitchen. So I kind of clean as I go. That way I don't have to clean up a big mess all at once. My booze block table that I chopped my onions and garlic on is cleared off. And I've wiped it down. I have to dry it more. That's done. I have put away all of the spices I had out, and the breadcrumbs and all that stuff's put away. I've washed my new knives that we just got. Those are drying. I am soaking my meatball mix bowl because I'm going to put it in the dishwasher in a little while, but I wanted to soak it. And everything else is in the dishwasher. I'm going to use this crushed tomato can as my utensil holder. And I just keep coming over and stirring the paste, scraping the bottom of this frying pan, get all the goodness up. Now, notice how the paste is looking a little bit darker. It's not as bright red. I'm not done yet, though. We're going to fry it. I'm frying this about 20 minutes. And making sure it's frying, too, and hearing the sizzle. So, as soon as Alexa goes off, her timer's on for 10 more minutes. I'm going to transfer this delicious tomato goodness into my big sauce pot. And we're going to pull the sauce pot to the front. Show you a little trick that I use. I have this splatter guard. When my sauce is simmering for the day, I cover it with a splatter guard. That will help keep the stove a little clean, although the stove is a mess because frying the meatballs is a gigantic mess. There's probably stains on this camera right now. So I'm gonna try to clean up the splatter a little bit before I pull the sauce pot forward. But for the rest of the day, as the sauce is simmering, I'm going to use that splatter guard, and that will keep it from making the stove a complete and utter mess, because sometimes it does boil up and splatter. You're going to keep it on low, and you're going to simmer it all day, though, so it really shouldn't splatter too much. Another reason why I use the splatter guard, I'll tell you a secret. In our other house, we didn't have air conditioning. And in the summer, I often had all the windows open. And we used to get a lot of flies because they would come in through the screen or come in, you know, God knows how they came in. We don't have the kind of fly problem in this house because we have air conditioning. So the other house, I didn't want any bugs to like accidentally land in my sauce, so I would use a splatter guard to keep the bugs out. The bugs are not a problem in this house because I actually have air conditioning for the first time in 14 years. We lived for 14 years without air conditioning. Because in the Catskill Mountains, you don't really need air conditioning. You need it for like maybe a week and a half in the summer, and that's it. The rest of the time of the year, you don't need air conditioning, really. So air conditioning is a luxury that it's not necessary, but I love having it because it does keep the bugs out of my house. Because I had a lot of flies in the other house, you know. You can't help it. They get in through the screens somehow. So in this house, I don't really keep the windows open very often, because we have the air conditioning and it keeps the house at an even temperature. So that is a little benefit of this house compared to our last house. All right, when we come back, I'm going to show you how I transfer the paste into the pot, and I'm going to be adding water to that frying pan to get every last ounce of tomato out of it and into my sauce pot, and that's going to simmer all day long. And it's going to smell Italian delicious, just like Grandma's house. So I'll meet you back here when the paste is done. Okay, the paste is darker and it is done. Time to transfer this delicious paste into our pot. I'm going to pull the pot forward. I just want to point out to you how much darker this paste is than when it went into the frying pan. Because it's been frying for 20 minutes. That's what you want it to look like going into your sauce pot. So I'm going to get every last bit, as much as I can, of this paste into the pot. Now I'm going to put water and fill the bottom of this pot with water. You don't need a whole lot of water. You want to cover the bottom of the pot with water. And I'm going to scrape all the water together with the leftover paste. And then we're going to add this to the sauce pot. In the meantime, I'm going to mix this well together. Be very gentle in mixing, because you don't want to break up all the meatballs. So I'm just going to go to the, put this spoon to the bottom of my pot and gently lift. Gently lift your meatballs up until all of the paste is incorporated into the sauce. All right, so I have now, I'm trying to scrape all the leftover paste into the water mixture. See how much flavor was in this frying pan that we would have lost if we didn't add the water? Now I'm going to dump. I'm going to pour all this delicious tomato water into the pot. All right, my pot's fairly empty. And now I'm going to gently mix the water into the sauce. Put your spoon on the bottom of your sauce pot and gently go from the bottom. And mix together the paste, the water, and your sauce without breaking up your meatballs. Try not to break up your meatballs. All right, that's mixed. I am going to put it on the front burner now. I'm going to do a quick wipe of my filthy stove, and then I'm going to put this on the front burner. I have set the burner on a low setting. I'm going to let the sauce come up to a simmer, and I'm going to simmer it all day long until dinner time. It is 10:45 in the morning right now. It takes an hour or a little more than an hour to get this sauce to the simmering section, to the simmering point. But the hard work's done. The kitchen's clean. I got my dinner on the stove. All I got to do later is boil some water for pasta, decide what kind of pasta we want to eat, and dinner served. We have sauce, we have meatballs, and we'll have pasta, and I'll make a salad on the side, and that will be dinner. Just like Grandma. And I always ask my grandparents, I said this in my last video where I cooked, how am I doing, Great-Grandma and Great-Grandpa? How am I doing? How am I doing, Great-Grandma and Great-Grandpa? Am I doing a good job? I hope I'm doing a good job. Hope I'm making you proud. I'm sure they're watching. I'm sure Grandma's watching. So I know I've shown this Boo's Butcher Block table before, but I haven't really mentioned where we got it from. See, it says Boo's Block Table. Guess what? We got this on Facebook Marketplace for a bargain rate. It was in rough shape. This was somebody else's butcher block table, but we really wanted to have a butcher block table to go underneath these lights that were in the kitchen. The previous owner had like a bookshelf here with like her cookbooks. I didn't want that. I wanted a workspace, kind of like an island, but I wanted a butcher block. So Joe was perusing on Facebook Marketplace one day, and this couple was moving, and they had this Boo's Butcher Block table. It wasn't in good condition. It was kind of really rough. The legs were messed up and the butcher block top needed to be refinished. So he has a trailer. So he went over and picked it up. It was cheap. Nowhere near what you would pay for it brand new. He didn't even bring it in the house. He went right to he has a garage, a detached garage where he has woodworking tools. He brought it right to the garage. He refinished the whole thing. He he literally refinished everything. The drawers, he cleaned it all up. It was all messy. And it looks brand new, but we didn't pay a lot of money for it. It was really a bargain. So how lucky were we that we found this on Facebook Marketplace. So this is a nice place to chop your onions and your garlic. It's also good for baking, putting my cookie trays here. And we have our new knife set that we got at Amazon, which I mentioned in my eggplant recipe, pasta recipe video, and my salt and pepper shakers are here too. Let me show you the sauce. It's not coming to a simmer yet. It's going to take a little while to come up to a simmer. One of the things you want to do is every, I would say 20 minutes, 15-20 minutes, stir your sauce. You don't want the bottom to burn. And you don't want it to be a rolling boil. If it's boiling too high, you need to lower your heat. You want it to simmer all day. You don't want it to have a rolling boil. If there's a rolling boil, it's going to be burning on the bottom and you're going to have burned sauce in your pasta. So you're going to want to watch it. This is a day when, I teach. So this is a day when I make sauce, when I'm grading. And I'm doing work for class. I'm sitting at the kitchen table. The puppies are underneath my feet. And I'm getting up every 15 minutes to stir the sauce. That's the day I make sauce, when I'm doing work at home. It has to simmer all day for all the flavors to meld together. So you're going to let it simmer low all day and stir it every 15-20 minutes until dinner time. And then you just got to boil some water for dinner. So of course, at the end of this video, I will show you the finished product and what it looks like after it's boiled all day. But for now, I'm kind of waiting for it to get up to the simmer. And then I'm going to make sure I watch the heat so that it doesn't burn. So you got to stir your sauce all day very carefully with the meatballs. Are some of the meatballs going to fall apart? Maybe. That's okay. You're going to eat it all together anyway. If a meatball falls apart, it's not the end of the world. You know how many meatballs I've had fall apart over the years? Hundreds and hundreds of meatballs. So, carefully stir from the bottom up, but hopefully my meatballs don't fall apart too much. All right, so before I sign off and come back later to show you what the sauce looks like, before I forget, thank you so much for watching this video. Consider subscribing to my channel where I do make a lot of Italian recipes. I also feature my fur babies and a lot of my decoration, especially my Halloween decoration. But I'll be doing Thanksgiving decoration videos and Christmas decoration videos and Easter decoration videos on this channel. So thank you so much for joining me. Stay tuned so that you can see the finished sauce. Hopefully I'll see you in the next video.